Lucas Kunce, candidate for the Democratic nomination in Missouri for the U.S. Senate. Lucas, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So this is your race is getting a lot of attention, more attention, I think, than people would have assumed a primary for Missouri Senate for a Democrat would be getting at this time. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real big contrast between me and my primary opponent. You know, we've got a billionaire heiress on one side, and then a guy like me who grew up completely broke. You know, my parents were always paycheck to paycheck. They got married at 19 and 22, had 4 kids, right? And just, you know, I remember watching my mom write the check at the grocery store, asked the guy not to cash it, and then we went bankrupt from medical bills when I was a kid, and we made it because people in our neighborhood took care of us, you know, passed the plate around down at my mom's prayer group and brought tuna casserole by the house, right? And so we have a real contrast. I'm running to fundamentally change who has power in this country, not taking money from corporate PACs, no federal lobbyists, no big fossil fuel executives, no big pharmaceutical executives, a really long list. And, you know, we got a real chance to actually win in November if we have someone like me, because the Republicans are going to have 2 people on the ballot. They're going to have a so-called independent who says he's the real Republican, and then they're going to have whoever wins the, you know, sort of Trumpy primary. So it's a real opportunity for us to pick one up.
And that's what I was getting at. I think with this question, I mean, your race, and we'll talk about that, is fascinating to me. But the idea that we have a chance at a pickup in Missouri in the Senate come this fall, like I say, was not something that I think people would have anticipated 6-9 months ago. And so this is a real opportunity to make the Republicans, at the very least, play defense in a place where they were not counting on having to do so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're going to grind these guys out. We have really good policy positions. We got a really strong grassroots movement. And it's true. I mean, they are going to be in a Ross Perot, George Bush situation. And my plan is to run right up the middle and win this thing.
You were an Iraq war veteran. You tweeted about this today in response to the burn pits controversy, essentially, where Republicans have played politics with health care provided for veterans who are experiencing just terrible effects from their time in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. What's your response to that, and how do you think that your potential constituents would respond if they knew the true brutality of the Republican Party on this front?
Yeah, I mean, it's criminal, right? These are the guys who always found money to keep us overseas, right? They found $4 trillion so that we could go fight for oil in Iraq. $4 trillion, right? And then they come out here all the time. They're always like, oh, thank you for your service, support our veterans and stuff like that. But every time there's a chance to support us, they absolutely don't do that. You see that right now, right? I live next to an open air burn pit. I mean, huge columns of black smoke all the time. We used to run through it and joke about how, you know, it was, we should have been doing gas mask runs. Turns out it wasn't so funny, right? Like Marines, soldiers, everybody else, they have all these conditions that they're having to live with now. Many are developing cancer and have problems with it. And the fact that these guys won't support us when it's actually given a chance to do something real is just typical, right? It's just typical. And it's like, if they want to actually support us and thank us for our service, they should invest in us, and they should invest in the communities that we all signed up to serve, right? Like, I signed up to join the Marines because my community took care of me as a kid. I signed up for them, and they've let places like that just absolutely fall apart, and they treat us like trash.
Let's talk a little bit about your race. I've looked at some of the fundraising. Your fundraising driven by small dollar donations. Some are from out of state, obviously, some in state. To be fair to your opponent, all of her money came from in state. But it all came from one bank account. It came from her. She has loaned her campaign at least $5 million. And so, I mean, she has the ability to go big on ads, I guess, and really, drive that. But she doesn't seem to have much of like an on the ground constituency. Like from a policy standpoint, and she's been unable to articulate in certain instances policies because it sort of feels like this is I don't know that this decision of hers was a little bit whimsical, but give me a sense of like where you see the biggest differences in your policy set with her.
I mean, the biggest difference between, we have several, you know, she's not been very supportive of LGBTQ rights, particularly on trans rights, and several other things. You know, she talks about how CRT is bad for the country and things like that. You know, she's really kind of taken a lot of Republican talking points. You know, used to host NRA fundraisers at her house, things like that. But for me, I think the biggest difference is just like who supports whom and where we come from, right? Like, in Missouri, people have been trying to claw back power for a generation. You know, we've been using ballot measures. We've been doing everything we can. And sadly, you know, everyday folks, they haven't seen the Democratic Party as a vehicle for doing that. And our campaign, my campaign, is a chance for us to show them how, when you don't take money from all these wrong people, you can actually stand for something different. You can do things differently. And instead, they're getting, you know, blasted on the airwaves by a billionaire heiress who doesn't know any policy or anything about how most of us grew up. And so I think the biggest difference, like really the biggest fundamental difference is Missourians want someone who understands what it's like to live like them, right? And the real national tragedy we have across the country, but also in Missouri very strongly, is that most people, they live paycheck to paycheck or one disaster from bankruptcy, just the way that I grew up. I mean, my mom 10 years ago got cancer, is working an hourly job. And like when you work an hourly job and you get cancer, you can't work your hours anymore. You can't afford your life. She had to move in with me. I know what this is like. I know the things we can do that can change that. You know, my opponent, she wasn't even for universal health care. She came out against it the other day. That's crazy, right? Like, that's not taking care of everyday people and everyday Missourians. And the other difference is I have a lifetime of service, right? I joined the Marine Corps to serve my community. I did 13 years, deployed to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan, did arms control negotiations out of the Pentagon, learned a lot about antitrust and defense contractors, and I really bring a lot of that to the table. And so, you know, when you talk about the difference on the campaign, the difference is she's written herself 5 $1 million checks. I have no family wealth, and so I'm relying on small donors. We actually have the highest percentage of grassroots donations of any campaign in the entire country this year. Like, that's crazy. Like, right here in Missouri, we've been able to do that. We've gotten the race on the map. You know, I'm on this program with you today. People talk about how they see me on MSNBC all the time, but I've also gone on Fox News 3 times in the last couple of months. I go on all the conservative talk radio, and I talk about the same values that I'll talk about with you, because I believe that if we go into that medium, if we go into that space and we talk about what we stand for, we can actually win. And I'm the only person who's brave enough or willing to do that.
Let me ask. I'm sorry. Just let me. So a lot of the broadly speaking, you know, the values you're talking about, I think, you know, align here with a lot of things that we talk about. When you get into the Senate, one of the things that is preventing the implementation of any legislation that reflects anything you're talking about has been the filibuster. Where are you on voting to get rid of the filibuster?
I think we need to get rid of it for everything, right? Like, right now, it's holding back veterans getting health care. It's holding back Roe versus Wade being codified. Like, we need to get rid of the filibuster and codify Roe versus Wade. And I mean, the real thing that makes me mad on Roe versus Wade is the fact that Missouri had the first trigger law to come into effect that says no exceptions for rape or incest even. Like, that's madness. And the country club Republicans, who were so excited, like you could see their excitement in signing this, the reason they were cool with that is because it's never going to affect them, right? They have money, they have power. They're just going to go out of state just like they've always done. They're going to send their families out of state. Like, they're going to get abortions just like they've always done. And the people it's going to hurt are the people in my old neighborhood who took care of me, who I've spent my entire life trying to protect and serve. And so, you know, I can't believe that we're letting the filibuster stand in the way of basic human rights, the opportunity to vote, right? We can't pass voting rights right here. Like, this is unreal. We're developing a 2-tiered system of rights where if you got wealth, access, and power, the world's your oyster, right? You can buy an election. You can do whatever you want. And if you don't, you have no real opportunity. I'm telling you what, that's what it looked like in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not my country. That's not what I wanted to be here. That's why I'm running this campaign, to fundamentally change who has power, because we have to do things like that. And I'm telling you, the filibuster is the number one tool for the people in the status quo to keep things just how they are, where they're not working for everyday people. It's just fewer folks that they have to buy off with campaign contributions. And I think we need to get rid of it.
You said that you learned about defense contractors from doing some work alongside them. What were some of the lessons that you learned about the way that the military-industrial complex works?
Yeah, it uses monopoly positions and power. It uses their strength with members of Congress. It uses the fact that most members of Congress on the Senate and House Armed Services Committee own defense contractor stock to get leverage and to get what they want, to squeeze out small businesses, to rob the taxpayer. It's crazy. Like, there's this one company I helped with some hearings on the background in Congress on, where it's called TransDigm. You know, every couple of years, the Department of Defense Inspector General looks at the defense ecosphere and identifies places where there's a single point of failure. So they're like, this O-ring for an aircraft, only one person makes it, only one person makes chaff. They figure this out and they say this is a threat. Well, what we've seen is these big defense contractors, they actually read that report and then they go buy those companies where they buy what they're making, their production line, and then they'll increase the cost like 4,000%. And they'll say, well, military, if you want to accomplish the mission, you're going to have to pay us the extra 4,000%. Like, it's straight up criminal. You saw this with Raytheon UTC when America was going to, or when the Biden administration was going to do the infrastructure bill. Originally, they were going to do it by increasing the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Now, mind you, it was 35 before Trump got hold of it, right? Raytheon UTC goes to all the members of Congress, goes to all the news media and says, if you do that, if you increase the corporate tax rate 7%, that's going to cost us $1 billion a year. And they told the members of Congress, they said, we're going to tell everybody that money can only come out of our research and development budget. It's the only place we can take it out of. That's going to cut our research and development by 20%. We're going to tell everybody America's less safe. You killed soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. That's what they said. Members of Congress blanched. They all own Raytheon UTC stock. Well, then Raytheon killed this, right? Killed our infrastructure. And then they went to their shareholders, their CFO at the next shareholder meeting. He said, guess what? We have more money than we've ever had. We're going to shower you with $5 billion of share buybacks and dividends. That is a direct transfer of wealth from our infrastructure here in Missouri, where things are falling apart, to Raytheon UTC shareholders, members of Congress, my opponent actually. And that's how they have power. It's the way they leverage it. They're too big. They steal from us. They take advantage of us, and they don't even give us good products. They kill small businesses and then shelve the products that they have. It's horrible.
All right, so you're super well.
Get along. If you really give me go on that one, I get wild about it.
I mean, no, it was appreciated.
To be honest, we're there's some antitrust fetishism around here too, to be honest with you. But in these parts, and this is super encouraging. As a senator, what do you do? How do you influence that? Because I think this administration, certainly more so than any in the past 40 some odd years, has been moving in the right direction when it comes to antitrust issues. Really, I mean, we may be, in a better shape than we have been since Reagan in that regard, at least in terms of where we're headed. But how do you, as a senator, how do you enhance that dynamic where these massive monopolies that exist in both, and a monopolistic behavior in the context of you're talking about it in terms of arms manufacturers, but also in the context of tech and in airlines, and I mean we can go across the board. It's everywhere.
Big ag has destroyed Missouri.
And so what can you do from the Senate to enhance?
So there are a few things. One is we have hearings in Congress, right? And David Cicilline out of Rhode Island ran a bunch of hearings in the House Antitrust Subcommittee against big tech. They exposed enough evidence there for 49 state attorneys general to have lawsuits against big tech companies. Lena Khan helped run those, and you mentioned the Biden administration and antitrust. She's now the chairwoman of the FTC. That was a great move. One thing we got to do as a U.S. senator, my job is to look at judges, right? Well, both parties for a very long time have been putting corporate hack judges into our federal judiciary who don't enforce things like the Packers and Stockyards Act. We're talking about Big Ag. They don't enforce the Sherman Antitrust Act. They use this Borkian economics and Milton Friedman attitude to absolutely gut small businesses and empower these big corporations. And so one thing that I'm going to do is I will never vote for a corporate judge. I don't care who puts the corporate judge against me. You know, these lawyers that come out of corporate law firms and are wrong on antitrust should not be in our judiciary anymore. They're literally helping these companies strip our communities for parts. So that's a big one. The hearings are a big one. I have a rewrite of the Sherman Antitrust Act that I'd like to put forward. There are different people on big tech or big ag who I could team up with to either pass or propose legislation. You know, John Tester's really big on the big ag stuff. I think Grassley and Klobuchar are too. There's real opportunity here, especially on big tech as well, where we need to do things like repeal Section 230. You know, these guys are these tech companies, they're the big tobacco of the 21st century. They know they're doing harm. It's in all their documentation, and they do it anyway for quarterly earnings reports, except you can't even sue them because Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act of 96 or whatever it was protects them from lawsuits. So there are a lot of things that we can do. I'm thrilled for the opportunity to get there and do that. This is like a really core area for me. And I want to do that. You know, I guess if I could mention one more, you know, Katie, there's a cartel that runs the price of insulin. They've taken it from $25 to $275. Well, Katie Porter has a proposal to cap insulin prices at $35, and that's another thing that I'd like to support and be a part of.
Well, I got to say, you know, to have a senator from Missouri who has these positions would be a fairly, a big change from what we've had in the past, in many respects, regardless of party. Yeah,
it'd be a game changer for us. It really would.
So the August 2nd is the primary, correct? We're just a couple of days out.
Coming right up.
So I imagine right now, one of the big things you need is volunteers to come out and knock on doors and people to call into relatives in Missouri and tell them to get out and vote. Do you anticipate like a big turnout, or is this going to be an off year, middle of summer, a small turnout type of an election?
Yeah, I expect it'll be a small turnout, especially in the Democratic primary. You know, there's been a lot of big flooding in St. Louis this week, too, which is going to probably hold the vote down. And that just means that as a grassroots campaign, we should have the opportunity to make a real difference. Every call that's made, every dollar that somebody donates, it helps us get out there. Again, we're going up against a self-funding billionaire who has no business holding a U.S. Senate seat, who's not going to protect everyday people, who knows nothing about antitrust or anything else, right? And if we're going to actually change who has power, we need volunteers, like you said. We need people to go to lucaskunce.com where you can sign up to volunteer. We do phone banking. We're doing text banking. We are going door to door. You can donate there as well. You know, every little bit helps keep us up. Again, it's lucaskunce.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Lucas Kunce MO, same handle on Instagram, and just help us get the word out. It's a very grassroots campaign, and it's a very unique opportunity to win a seat in Missouri with someone who's very, very different than we've ever sent there before and can actually do some real things to help the Democratic Party actually get a footing in the Midwest again, because the Midwest, we've been under economic warfare for a long time. No one here has stood up to that. And if someone finally does, Democrats are going to be heroes here again.
I can't tell you how much I hope you win this primary and then go on into the general election. And if we have the opportunity, hopefully we can talk to you again in the run up to the general election. The website we will put a link to at majority.fm. We'll put one in the podcast and YouTube description. Good luck and wish you the best.
Thank you. And anyone from Missouri or who knows people there, please tell your friends. Let's make this thing happen.
All right, Lucas
Appreciate
Kunce.
it.
It is KUNCE.com, Lucas Kunce. Wow.
It's a big opportunity.